Today, you are going to learn everything you need to know regarding position in CSS. We are first going to go over the different position values: static position, relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. And then while we're going over those, I'm going to get into some examples of those right here. And we're going to use Mozilla Developer Network. This is a great resource for developers that I really trust its information. And I think they did a great job with this article here. So first off, what kind of is position, or what is the position property in CSS? Well, the position CSS property sets how an element is positioned in a document. The top, right, bottom, and left properties determine the final location of positioned element. In other words, you can use the position property in CSS to kind of change the default behavior of how an element is being positioned within your web page or within your document. All right. And there's a handful of different position properties that you can set. So as you can see, you can set something to be position static or position relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. So let's dive in a little bit more into how each one of these works. So first off, we have position static. And when an element is position static, it is positioned accordingly to the normal flow of the document. The top, right, left, and z-index properties have no effect on an element that is positioned statically. And this is the default value of elements within your HTML. So elements by default are position static. They are just going to be positioned accordingly to the normal flow of your web page, and they're just going to kind of fall in place as normal. So if we go up to this example here, this yellow box here is currently positioned statically, meaning that in the HTML, it is structured to be within these left and right boxes, and also within this text up here and down here. So it's just positioned normally within the document flow here of all these other elements. But next we have position relative. And a relatively positioned element is going to be according to the normal flow of the document. So it's going to be like position static, but then it's going to be offset relative to itself based on the top, right, bottom, and left values. The offset does not affect the position of any other elements. Thus, the space given for the element in the page layout is the same as if it were position static. So for position relative, it's originally positioned just like it would be with a normal document flow, just like a static element. But then you can use the top, left, right, and bottom properties to move the element on your web page relative to where it would have originally been positioned. Okay, so if I click this and I now position this box relative, well, now that it has a position property, I can set these other properties of top and left here to give it an offset. So let me first just give it a top offset of 0 pixels and a left offset of 0 pixels. What you're going to see is that it's the same as static. It's just positioned in the normal document flow here. But if I then give it one of this top property here, and let's give it 40 pixels, not 400 pixels, you're going to see that it is now pushed down 40 pixels. And what this does is, okay, it's originally positioned kind of right here, statically in the normal document flow. And then saying top 40 pixels is saying push this element 40 pixels from the top, meaning 40 pixels from where it usually was. And this can kind of be a little bit confusing. You might think that this is 40 pixels bottom, but this is 40 pixels from the top. All right. So it pushes it down 40 pixels right here. And then if I add 40 pixels left, what you see is it's pushed 40 pixels to the right. So its original position static is going to be right here. And then I'm saying, I want you to push it 40 pixels from the left corner. And just to show you the right and bottom properties, if I do 40 pixels from the right, it's going to push it 40 pixels to the left because it's saying push it 40 pixels from its right corner here. And then if I use bottom, you're actually going to see it's going to move it up, push it 40 pixels from the bottom. All right. So position relative is it's going to default to be in its static position here, but then you can use the bottom, right, top, and left properties to push it relative to where it was originally positioned. All right. So that is position relative. Now, next up, we have position absolute. And for this, the element is completely removed from the normal document flow. No space is created for the element in the page layout. It is positioned relative to its closest positioned ancestor, if any. Otherwise, it is placed relative to the initial containing block. Its final position is determined by the values of the top, right, bottom, and left properties. All right, so let's go look at an example of how this one works. So if I move to position absolute here, what you're going to see is that it kind of takes it out of between these boxes here. And you can see that these two boxes, they now collapse next to each other. And the reason for that is because we take this yellow box out of the normal document flow. It is not positioned relative to any other elements, meaning it's positioned absolutely to its next closest containing block. So it takes it completely out of the document flow, as you can see there. And right now what I'm saying is that, okay, right, this top left corner here is going to be the containing block of this element. So I'm positioning it absolutely to kind of that containing block here. So I'm moving it 40 pixels from the top here, and then 40 pixels from the left corner. So 40 down, 40 left, and that puts it right here. All right, so position absolute, it takes it out of the normal document flow, and then you can use the top, left, right, and bottom properties to position that element. And just keep in mind that it's going to be positioned relative to its closest positioned ancestor. So what that means is that it's going to be positioned relative to any ancestor that it has. So any kind of containing elements that have a position property set on them. And if it doesn't have any containing elements with a position property set on them, then it's going to be placed relative to its initial containing block. Next up, we have position fixed. And position fixed is the element is removed from the normal document flow, so similar to position absolute, and no space is created for the element in the page layout. It is positioned relative to the initial containing block established by the viewport, except when one of its ancestor has a transform, perspective, or filter property set to something other than none, or the will change property is set to transform, in which case that ancestor behaves as the containing block. All right, so that, I feel like that sounds a little bit more complex than it is, but we'll show you some examples of it. And its final position is determined by the values of the top, right, bottom, and left properties. So if we go back up here, and instead of positioning this as position absolute, let's switch it to position fixed. And what you see here is that now it still takes it out of the normal document flow, meaning these two boxes here, they know nothing about this box. So these are not positioned relative to this because it's completely out of the document flow of your web page. And right now it's positioned relative this kind of overall box right here. So it's 10 pixels from the top here and 100 pixels from the left here. And if I switch this to 0 pixels and 0 pixels, you're going to see that it pushes it right up to the top and pretty much right over to the left here. Now, a position fixed element is often used for adding a footer. And the way that you could do this is if I, instead of doing top 0, I do bottom 0, you see that it places it right at the bottom of this kind of containing block here, which is kind of mimicking my web page. And then if I do width 100% here, and I do left 0 pixels to just move it to the left side, you're going to see that it now takes up almost all of the space of this viewport here. And I could tweak this a little bit to make it look a little bit better, but you could see how this could be used for a footer in which it would just remain at the bottom of this page. And you can see that any scrolling that I do on this web page here, this is going to remain right at the bottom here. All right. So I'm fixing this to the bottom of my web page. So that is position fixed. And the very last position that you need to know is position sticky. So a stickily position element is an element that is positioned according to the normal flow of the document, and then it is offset relative to the nearest scrolling ancestor and containing block, including table elements based on the values of the top, right, bottom, and left. The offset does not affect the position of any other element. So let's show you how this one works here. And if I click on position sticky right here, what you're going to see is that it positions this right in the normal of my document flow here. So this box knows about my yellow box and my blue box knows about my yellow box. And it's just positioned normally. It looks like it's positioned static. But you can see when I scroll this element here, it actually stays in my document here. And it stays 20 pixels from the top of this kind of containing block here. All right, so this kind of makes sure that it stays within the viewport even when you are scrolling. So it's almost like it goes from position static to like more of a fixed position to where I fix it 20 pixels from the top here. All right, so position sticky, it's positioned within the normal flow of the document, just like position static here. You can see there's no difference by default there. But then when I scroll down, it sticks within my viewport at this 20 pixels from the top. So the position property in CSS allows you to set how an element is positioned within kind of your flow of the document. And you have 5 different properties here: position static, relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. Position static is the element is positioned according to the normal document flow. The top, right, bottom, left, and z-index properties have no effect on these elements, and this is the default value. For a relatively positioned element, the element is positioned according to the normal flow of the document, but then you can offset this element relative to itself using the top, right, bottom, and left properties. And then you have position absolute, in which the element is completely removed from the normal document flow and no space is created for the element in the page layout. This is why in this example here, when I go to position absolute here, it scoots these boxes together because they no longer know about this absolutely positioned element because no space is created for it in the page layout. And it's positioned relative to its closest positioned ancestor or to its containing block if it doesn't have a closest position ancestor. And then for position fixed, the element is also removed from the normal document flow. No space is created for the element in the page layout, and it's positioned relative to its initial containing block established by the viewport. And then you can adjust this one using the top, right, bottom, and left properties as well. And then finally, for position sticky, the element is positioned according to its normal document flow, just like a statically positioned element. And then it's offset by its nearest scrolling ancestor. So it's originally going to be positioned static here, and then when you scroll, you can see that you can set these top, left, right, and bottom properties and give it an offset as you scroll so it remains in the viewport here. So that is position within CSS. I hope you learned something in this video, and I'll see you in that next one.